let's uncover the violent, unheard side of India's freedom struggles, because I think since they've been so whitewashed with, I'm sure, like you said, Gandhi's efforts and everyone else's efforts are not to be denied, but it's just events and documents and slow, painful burn of protesting. Let's talk about the guys who actually, took up arms and
Yeah.
got revolutionary stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, and there are so many. Of course, Savarkar is now better known, right?
Hmm?
All the people who were rotting in Kalapani prison, right? And remember, in Kalapani prison, and this is how, sadly, modern Indian historians have completely distorted the story, right? Savarkar is not the only one who was suffering there.
Hmm.
There were people who called themselves Marxists also who were really suffering there,
Hmm.
right? But remember, those Marxists really loved their country. They wanted independence. They are not like the other so-called communists and Marxists we know who always look to China. They were not looking to China or Russia. They were looking to save their own country.
Yeah.
Right? And they were willing to go through unbearable torture. I mean, the torture that Kalapani had, for 16 hours, you would be tied to wooden stakes. And, jo bail ghumate hai na, in the, even today, if you go to villages, when you get oil out of an oil mill, so you put the grain, right? And you have a yoke and, there are stone grinders and the bullock goes round and round and round and round. And the oil comes out. That's how, traditional oil press. Human beings were made to do that for 16 hours a day. Kalapani was incredible. You must go to Kalapani. Go to Andaman.
Is it still around?
It's now a museum of sort. Yeah. You should go to the cell of Savarkar and see all that, right? Most Indians have no idea about all of this. All this rubbish that people talk these days. I mean, they have no clue the sacrifices that were made. By the way, there's this one incredible story of in Bengal, it's called the Agni Yug, the age of fire, right? With all these great revolutionaries, Khodiram Bose, again, I get goosebumps talking about him. Barely a boy, really not much more than a boy, hardly, he must have been 16, 17, 18, whatever. Sang, in Bengali, he sang Akbar Bidai Dema Ghure Ashi, supposedly, right? And which is basically, let me go, mother, main laut ke aunga, I'll come back. See, now I can feel, tears prickling. And do you know what happened? I mean, there is, this sort of revolutionary history, this kind of sacrifice that people made. And these were all boys. I mean, think of Bhagat Singh, right? I mean, these were not more than young boys.
I have his jail diary writings. I suddenly randomly found the book. It is insane.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So these were not more than young boys, actually. And they were willing to, sing Vande Mataram up to the gallows. This entire history was wiped away in a sense, right? We never celebrated all of this. Savarkar, you think of the torture on Savarkar in Kalapani. And yet, for most part of Indian history, we have not been able to, modern Indian history, we have not been able to valorize these people, including Subhash Bose, who you mentioned, right? I mean, why should the Subhash Bose statue, facing Parliament be controversial? It is only controversial to the British, who think of him as fascist.
It's very interesting that you often would go to, if you go to European towns or European cities, in the squares, the one statue you most often see is a conqueror or a general.
Yes.
Right? They completely valorize the valiant, the violent. Right? It's only here that we are only supposed to do it for Shivaji. We get one national hero who used violence.
But you see, even Shivaji would have been wiped out had it not been for the love that the Marathis have for him. Right? Remember, and this is the other thing that we've been misled on. Shivaji, yes, was a great Maratha hero. But do you know Rabindranath Tagore wrote about Shivaji?
I had no idea.
Do you know Rabindranath Tagore believed that Shivaji should be celebrated? So, Maratha and Rajput valor was very much part of the 19th century nationalist mind in Bengal when this entire Age of Fire was happening.
Mm.
Do you know that one of the places where, because the British were tracking these people a lot, a whole range of gymnasiums came up, akharas. And the revolutionaries would go to the akharas to exercise, and they would pass chits of paper and say things to each other to pass message, because everything else was being tracked. In fact, Swami Vivekananda, his brother, ran one of the akharas.
That's so interesting.
The young Vivekananda was going to one of these akharas.
One can't even imagine what it must feel like to be surveilled to that level.
Completely. So these akharas came up across Bengal, for young men to go and exercise. That's why Swami Vivekananda is always saying that, a strong body is really important. Not just a strong mind, but also a strong body. Because he comes from that milieu, right? He comes from that milieu where people are protesting. He comes from the revolutionary fervor, right?
I can't imagine being in that era and having someone else be your master as you figure out ways to usurp the country back from them, the country we now take for granted.